Hello and welcome to our webinar, Digital Power, Support Your IB Extended Essay Students with Key Resources. Before we start, some quick housekeeping. If you have any issues with connectivity, please try leaving the webinar and rejoining. If you have any issues at all during this webinar, please email support@jcsonlineresources.org. While we're introducing ourselves, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box by letting us know where you're from. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce JCS Online Resources to those of you who aren't aware of us. We are a subscription agency for online educational resources. In this increasingly complex and challenging digital world, we believe the need for digital resources from trusted sources is more essential than ever. We pride ourselves on the quality academic resources in our catalogue and are proud to offer support for encouraging usage of resources and that which facilitates the teaching of digital media and information literacy. Today, we are joined by Loykie Lominé, who I'll hand over to in just a second. Loykie has worked for the IB for over 20 years as a teacher, extended essay coordinator, senior examiner, and workshop leader, and has trained thousands of IB educators worldwide. There will be some time for questions at the end, but please feel free to leave any in the chat box throughout the session. And now I'll hand over to Loykie.
Thank you very much, Hilary. Yes, my friend, it's a real privilege to be leading this webinar with all of you. And it's quite amusing the way it looks on my screen because I've got the list of your names gradually appearing, so I can see Emma, Eman, Jonathan, Leila, Margie, and others down the list. Now, I'm going to try to make this session as interactive as possible, my friends. So it would be wonderful if we could start using the chat box together. And as Hilary wrote, would you mind telling us where you are in the world so we can get some sense that yes, we are the IB, we are an international community, and I think I can see all your names, and I should be able to see the chat box as well. So if you could share on the chat box where where you are, this would be wonderful. Again, we are going to interact in the chat box because I'm not going to be talking about digital power for 50 minutes non-stop. I love the title of this webinar that Hilary created for us. So we have colleagues from Thailand, from Abidjan. Bonjour, Marie-Hélène, lovely to have you here. I prepared this webinar in a very traditional way, and by this I mean that I started by listing some intended learning outcomes. As you know, it's what we do with our students when we tell them, at the beginning of a session, for example, by the end of the session, you will know the following. So my friends, by the end of our webinar today, you will have new ideas. You will have gained new ideas about range of digital sources that our extended essay students may use. You will also have sharpened your understanding of IB academic integrity. As we know, for us in the IB community, academic integrity is one of the most important values that we have, and I'm sure you're familiar with the IB documents, IB policy. I will say some more words about that as well. And I also want to give you some new knowledge about the future EE guide. As you know, it will be published in early 2025 for first assessment 2027. You may have attended some workshops introducing it already. Many of them will be offered. I will just say some words about that. So we will be looking into the future. And thank you again, for sharing some more messages. We have Emilia from Bydgoszcz in Poland. Wonderful. Bob, hi, hello from Wellington. So these are my intended learning outcomes. I structured my session as follow. I will start with a metaphor because I like metaphors. And the main part of the session will be, of course, on this topic, digital resources for extended essay. And we all have some in mind, but maybe I will make you think, oh yeah, I had not thought about that. That's an interesting online resource my students could be using. We'll say a few words about digital literacy, academic integrity. We know how paramount it is in the IB community. And towards the end of the session, I will talk about the ethical researcher, because in the new EE guide, we have a section called the ethical researcher. As you can imagine already, it's linked to academic integrity, but there are some other dimensions. And my friends, just as I am starting with a metaphor, we will end with a metaphor together. And we say hello to Leila, who's joining us from Turkey. Wonderful. As I told you, I want to start with a metaphor. I did not just use one image. When I prepared this slideshow, I decided to use 4 images of different parts of the world. So I will have them on the screen for you now. This one is from Australia. This one is from Italy. Then we have the US, and then we have one which does not exist yet, but it's a project. It will be between the island of Zanzibar and Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. So my metaphor is a bridge. Hence my question to all of you, why do you think we are starting a session about extended essay talking about bridges? Visualizing bridges. Could you share your ideas, your reaction in the chat box, please? Why a bridge? I've come here to hear about digital sources and resources. Why is Loykie telling us about bridges? So this is where I would invite you to think about the extended essay in a different way, to think that the extended essay actually is a bridge. I love what you're writing, Margie, linking knowledge. Yeah, this was not my idea, but it may be even better than my own than my own idea. Now, the IB defines itself. Not saying that the diploma is a document hand of secondary education. The IB defines itself as being pre-university course. IB diploma is pre-university. So this bridge is the link between secondary education, high school, and university. And in the IB diploma, TOK helps with that bridge, and the extended essay is a bridge onto university for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is the way the extended essay is supported. As we know, it is supported on a one-to-one basis. It's not taught by a teacher on a weekly basis with lots of other students. You know, the model we have for extended essays, pure university model. It's what we have at the end of undergraduate course, postgrad, and even PhD level. When you have a supervisor working with the students they meet regularly. This is pure university. This is academic. Second reason for our metaphor of the bridge onto higher education is about the type of research students are expected to do. Students are expected to do academic research for their extended essay. And that expression will feature even more explicitly as one of the aims of the extended essay in the new guide. So remember that expression, academic research. Extended essay is academic research. The world of academia is a world of university. So again, our bridge. And third reason why I chose this metaphor is because of the length of the extended essay, which is 4,000 words. Now, as part of their diploma and in other high school, students are very unlikely to be asked to write an assignment of that length. And in many subjects, even in their first or second year at university, students will not be asked to write 4,000 words. They may be in their first year asked to write 2,000 words, and all the other students who have not done IB will think, oh, it's way too much, I cannot do that. You know, and our IB grad will think, yeah, I can deal with that. I wrote something twice as long. So, my friends, something you may want to take away from this session is this notion of a bridge. And I refer actually to the bridge to the metaphor of the bridge in the document I wrote for JCS Online Resources, where at the very end, in my conclusion, I developed this idea that the IB is pre-university and the extended essay is a bridge onto higher education. You so feel free to use this image later on, of course. So we have this bridge onto university using digital resources. When I say digital resources, what comes to mind very spontaneously? Could you share with me in the chat box some examples of the digital resources your students may be using, or very spontaneously when you hear the word digital resource, what do you think about? What comes to mind? Oh, Marie-Hélène, I love you. JSTOR. Yes, I will talk about JSTOR. I'm a big fan of JSTOR, absolutely. Yes, also, yes. Marilyn, you feel like you've seen my slides. JSTOR, what else when we think about digital resources? And we can think, about our own extended essay students, or, when ourselves, we we were at university. Maybe, yes, Google Scholar, absolutely, Marie-Hélène, yes. We'll give maybe a few seconds to other colleagues who want to contribute other ideas about what digital resources could, should our extended essay students use. Well, as I said earlier, extended essay is academic research, and as you know, academic journals, peer-reviewed journals, are regarded as the pinnacle of academic research. And again, when we were at university, we probably had, professors who told us, do research, use academic journals. And at the time, when I was at university, we did not have digital sources. It was all hard copies, printed copies of all those journals, the international journal of this and that, the Indian journal of this and that. Now, nowadays, of course, academic journals exist online, exist digitally. We want students to do academic research. We're not at university yet. So even if our students cite just one or two academic journals, their examiners, will be we'll be thrilled. We'll have a big sign. We'll have a big smile on their face. And Marie-Hélène, you mentioned Google Scholar, which is a brilliant tool to find sources which are academic. Again, I'm a big fan of Google Scholar, which is, like a gateway onto academic journals. Besides academic journals, another source I had identified here for you is ebooks. Ebooks, online copy, digital copies of books, and books have gone through the same historical process as academic journals. They used to be only printed hard copies. More and more have been digitalized, and now very often publishers at the same time will release the hard copy and the digital copy. And as you may know, there are now some ebooks that only exist as ebooks, and there is not even a hard copy. And the last book no, it's not the last one. The penultimate book I published last year was only ebook, and I kind of missed having the printed copy that I could show my parents, my family, have on my shelf. So I think many of us still think that a book is something printed and you have it and you need to be able to handle it, to have it in your hands. Oh, there was a brilliant talk yesterday by Kai, and I think it's been recorded, and Hilary may be able to tell us more about that. And Kai told us about ebooks and the use of ebooks for students' research. I see you. Yes, you mentioned Gail. Absolutely. RefSeek. Absolutely. Mamta, thank you very much for that. As you can see, I gave the example here of databases, online databases, library databases, statistical databases. JSTOR, is my example. I'm a big fan of JSTOR. JSTOR defined itself as a digital library, offering access to academic journals, ebooks, etc. Because those digital resources I have listed on my screen here, it's not a comprehensive list, and they overlap sometimes, because JSTOR will help you find relevant ebooks, and the ebooks may quote some academic journals. Online databases, yes, very important for our extended essay students. I also added here on my list newspaper collections can be extremely helpful for students who do extended essay in subjects such as history, global politics, and again, newspaper collections used to be only physical, on dusty shelves in libraries of archives, and now increasingly they are digitalized. And what is wonderful is that it's possible to search through different categories according to topic, time period, geographical region, and they enables our students to get first-hand accounts of historical events, reporting on them, social movement, cultural trends, how people reacted at the trend at the time. And it's not a resource that spontaneously many students will be using, but it's worth thinking that it's a very valid, very interesting type of digital resource. On my list, my friends, I also mentioned government documents, official public archives. Again, it will be more relevant for some subjects rather than others. Those government publications, they can include statistics, like the census or health statistics. As you know, many students still do their extended essay about COVID, about the impact of COVID, about the way different different countries put different policies in place. And you have a great question, Margie, how to find digital newspaper collection. Oh, there are several ways, and it is possible through online databases, which will have direct connection to that. And many newspapers, also online. Newsbank, as Mel wrote, will give you the possibility to access them. Absolutely. Slight difference between newspaper collection. It tends to be a commercial sector, private companies, government documents, official public archives, legislative text, policies, guidelines, etc. They are available usually usually for free. On my list, my friends, I also have museum catalogs and library collections, which again is not some type of digital resources that many students spontaneously will use, but it can give a lot of contextual data. It's possible to access audiovisual material, and when a student does the effort to go the extra mile, to do some research differently from the others, they will mention that in their RPPF, in the reflection form. And this is where as examiner, I will think, wow, the students is really committed to their research. The word commitment is what we have for criterion E of the extended essay. I remember a couple of years ago, I had a students who explained they were in Australia, and they went to the National Library in Canberra. And then you think, yes, that students really went the extra mile, decided to do some extra research, and then they stand out in a way, those students, when they think more creatively about a range of digital resources. Of course, all the others are fine, but then, some students, you get the impression they understand that research, accessing research findings and doing research can take many forms. I also, colleagues mentioned here, open access repositories. They are often they are online platforms, typically offered by research institutes, by universities, by some governmental agencies, and they are open. In the sense of it is free, because they want to make knowledge freely accessible in a way. And I also mentioned here reference works. Now, reference works, would include resources which, of course, are reliable. We think of atlases, dictionaries, encyclopedia, and as Gerda told us, yes, Press Reader is a great newspaper collection. There are many of those, absolutely. And you may have students who decide to use Atlas to compare how maps of different parts of the world change over time. Now, this is a very interesting topic for an extended essay in history, for example. And eventually, on my list, I have type of online digital resources I see more and more, and it's about our students, our DP students, citing, quoting university theses or dissertation, and they use them in two ways. Sometimes they cite it directly, because many universities put their master's students' dissertations online, many PhD online as well. And for students who are thinking, wow, later I will be studying at university, this is a very reliable source. Yes and no, because we don't know about the quality of the master's thesis that is being published. So sometimes it works better when students access such documents and just as a look at the bibliography, because the bibliography itself is what may inspire students. The students could see then a reference to an academic journal and decide to use that academic journal directly. So what I did, my friends, with for all of you here, is to list a range of possible, digital resources that our students can use. Thank you very much for all your contributions in the chat box. Again, this really helps me ensure that our session is as interactive as possible. So if I go back to the structure of our webinar today, I am here right now. We started brainstorming digital resources, a wide range. I want to say a few words about this notion of digital literacy. Digital literacy skills, it's a word we use more and more in IB schools. 30 years ago, we did not talk about digital literacy. We only talked about literacy. And of course, now we need to make sure that our students are able to navigate the world of online sources. And my first bullet point, it may seem very obvious, but it's about finding them. And I love the fact that some of you in the chat box asked, well, how do I find it? It was Margie's question. How would you find digital newspaper collection? How do we find them? And linked to that is topic that some librarians do some very effective workshops about sometimes. I was very lucky because a couple of years ago I attended an IB training workshop about librarians category 1. I learned a lot about the word of librarianship, and I learned a lot about the topic of effective search strategies, Boolean operators, searching with some keywords, and then making students realize that research is not just going onto Google, typing a word and then clicking on the first link, and you have then you have your answer. So I promise you, if you have time, explore this topic of search strategies. It is fascinating, and of course later our students, many of them will go to university and will be trained into doing this more advanced research. At our level, we can give them some hints, we can give them the opportunity to discover those resources and to start exploring them, to start finding them, searching for them, and also, and those are two very important words, making sure they are reliable and credible. I know the word I could have added here is valid. And there are several techniques that students can use to evaluate the reliability and the credibility of their source. It is possible to attend training session, workshops just about that, giving you lots of models to help students evaluate whether, one blog could be not reliable, but another blog could be very reliable. One Twitter account, we don't say Twitter anymore, X, could not have real value, but another one could have a lot of fascinating historical value because it is about current affairs. If you have if you check the X accounts of Elon Musk, for example, 2 years ago in July 2023, when he said he was the new owner, the new CEO, he was going to change the name from Twitter to X. There's a lot of material there. But of course, there are some accounts on X and Twitter we would not want students to use, but there are some others that have a lot of value. Many organizations, many politicians, government, etc., use those sources. So spontaneously, it's not because it is a blog or an account on social media networks that it has that it has no value. And my final point here is about this terrible word, the P word. We all get obsessed about plagiarism, and we tell students you must cite and reference properly, otherwise you will be found guilty of plagiarism. And we spend time and energy teaching students how to reference their sources. uses. And sometimes when we communicate this to students, we miss the point. The point is that it is about academic integrity. It is about, very humbly saying, those are my sources. The photos I showed you at the beginning of my bridges, always I had the hyperlink there. My document from JCS Online, I told you this is my source. So it's not about the nitty gritty of technical skills and do you use APA or MLA and is the comma at the right place and is it underlined or in italics. IB examiners are not assessing that. When students go to university later, they will be taught and they will be trained in their own subject areas about how to reference. For us here, what we need to remember is that we teach our students how to cite and reference in order to uphold values of academic integrity. And this is where I want to ask you all the questions, my friend, about artificial intelligence. By AI, I mean generative artificial intelligence. Using ChatGPT, using Copilot, Claude, etc., can very easily give us text. Students and all of us, I'm sure we use those tools. And in a few seconds, I can have half a page on a topic of my choice. But is it a digital source? Could I invite you to think about that and maybe react in the chat box? Text from ChatGPT, are they digital sources? Would students be expected to mention them in their bibliography? Would be wonderful to have your ideas about that. Very succinctly, like Mel did. Yes, absolutely. Oh, hi, Bernadette. Thank you for joining us today. Yes, absolutely, Margie. Yes. And it is a fascinating discussion I've had with colleagues of mine or other senior examiners, because on the one hand, we could think that Gen AI, is a tool. It's a compilation of text, but it does not have an individual author or a corporate author. But the other way to look at it is about, again, academic integrity. Realizing, yes, this is where I found those ideas. So exactly, Margie, as you wrote, students would need to mention the keywords they use. I think the technical term about that is the prompts that they use. And I am going now to share on my screen the official, I think it's the next screen. Yes, the official IB document about that. Sources at the bottom of the screen. This is not my document. It is from the IB. And I give you a couple of minutes to read this long text we have here on the screen. So exactly as Margie said, students would be expected in their bibliography to tell us, well, the source is the following. The source is not a person. It is a software tool. It is generative artificial intelligence tool, and this is their response to the following prompts. Now it's then very difficult for examiners, because as examiner we're expected to give marks only to students for their own ideas, and here the students say, this is not my own idea. I quote not a person, not an academic. I quote ChatGPT, and then its question is, at what point is it the student's own idea? Artificial intelligence is still very recent. We're all learning how to work with it. The IB strongly encourages us to use it in the classroom. You asked a great question, Herman. We don't know that because again, this is still so new. We still don't have any guidelines from the IB about that, and it would not be counted as percentage. Because it's not just about the quantity, the number of words. It's also about the type of research that the students have done. Was it only done at the very beginning to brainstorm ideas? Was it done at the end, to help write the conclusion? Because those tools, AI tools, they are brilliant. You give them a text in 3,000 words, and you ask, "Oh, can you summarize this for me?" And this would be the student's conclusion. But then we start thinking, well, is it the student's own work or not? And again, we don't have an answer an answer to that. And this is where the IB, this fascinating position where they tell us, on the one hand, yes, as teacher, we should be using the IB, we should be using generative artificial intelligence because we can do some great activities with students. And on the IB website, there are free online courses about that, for us as educators, giving us examples of using artificial intelligence to create session plan, to create unit planners, to do class activities with students, to brainstorm ways of teaching, ways of enriching the students' learning experience. So on the one hand, yes, as educators, we should be using it because it makes students' learning experience even more richer. But at the same time, we have to be aware in students' assessment of academic integrity. And I have here, my friend, a screenshot of a document. All of you must know it's the academic integrity policy. It is the latest version. And I draw your attention to that because last year, 2023, the IB added a new appendix specifically about that, on the use of artificial intelligence tools. That appendix is about four pages long. And as you can see here, the first point at the beginning is about teaching students about academic integrity. But Herman, no, there is nothing about percentage, because in itself, this is not what we were assessing. We're not counting words. It's much more about the students telling us, I use all those sources. I use an academic journal. I went to the National Library, and also to help me with this part of my work, I used some AI tools. Eman, if you're interested in this, the IB also organizes workshops specifically about academic integrity, and there are some specifically about artificial intelligence. I just wanted to draw your attention to this. Of course, more and more IB schools have not only academic integrity policy in school policy, but some policy specifically about the use of artificial intelligence. And my friends, here on this strange visual, which is mine, it's very typical PowerPoint created by a teacher who knows a little bit how to use PowerPoint. It's not a professional document. So I created this pie chart here. And as you can see, I've got 4 areas. One of them, I call it academic integrity. I did not call it that way. This is what it's called. And I identified here 3 dimensions. And the first one is about authentication. And this is where the students will tell us, this is my own work. That's also why we have reflection sessions with our students, at least 3 of them. We see their project develop over time, and the student has to authenticate, say, yeah, this is my own work, I sign it, I confirm it, and as teacher, as supervisors, we have to authenticate as well. We have to confirm to the IB, to the best of my knowledge, it is my students' own work. The second aspect of academic integrity is about acknowledging all sources, printed sources, digital sources, students doing interviews, questionnaires, students doing experiments, where they got the data from. Research has 2 dimensions, data collection and data analysis. So, data collection is the students telling us, methodologically, I did the following. Those are, this is where data comes from. primary research, secondary research, literature review, etc., depending on the subject. And then the second aspect is analysis. It's when you have the core, the data, you start making sense of it, you start interpreting it, you compare it to your findings from secondary literature, secondary research you had done, for example. And the focus here is students telling us, those are all my sources. Again, we're not bothered about the technical aspects of, is it MLA, is it APA, is a comma, is a dot missing? This is not part of the assessment criteria for extended essay. As part of the assessment criteria, we currently assess presentation, structure, layout. We're not assessing referencing. And with the new guide, the assessment criteria are changing, and presentation will not be even assessed anymore. And my third point here, my friends in blue, is about compliance with all academic integrity policies, the one from the school and the one from the IB. So what I try to encapsulate here with 3 points in blue is what academic integrity is about. And this pie chart here was designed by me, but there is something equivalent in the new EE guide. As I told you, there is a section called the ethical researcher. Now, that document will only be published in early 2025, but the IB, through its process of curriculum review and sharing the outcomes of the discussion, has shared a lot of information already about the ethical researcher and about the new guide. And so this ethical researcher has got this dimension about academic integrity. And there are 3 other dimensions, which here are in my pie in purple, all the purple, all the shade of purple and blue. So my friends, when I talk about ethical researcher, what do you think this covers as well? It covers academic integrity, but can you think of other aspects of extended essay student as an ethical researcher? What would our EE students have to bear in mind to be very ethical? I'll let you think about that, and maybe in the chat box share some ideas about this. So EE research and ethics. Now, of course, it includes academic integrity. What else? What else could it include? And this is where Bernadette, Margie, and Emma are thinking, I don't know. This is a very difficult question. Yes, I love what you wrote, Budi. Absolutely. In some cases, it could be about informed consent from the research participant. Fantastic. Yes. It's about thinking about, the impact of my research. Well, impact on my participants. Yes, very, very true. And Bernie used a great word, Bernadette, when you wrote about community. Oh, yes, personal, yes. And you will see, well, yes, let me check the time. Yeah, I need to move on with my presentation. So the ethical researcher, also has those dimensions. One is about, well-being and sensitivities, and this is where, Bernadette, when you told us about personal, of course it is personal impacts, because we could have some students who do research on topic which are, directly linked to their own experience. And it's about the impact of research on the self. So impact on the person, as Bernadette said, it's about the impact on others. Budi told us about research participants. Absolutely. It's about informed consent. It's making them understand how this data is going to be used. So part of the idea of well-being sensitivities is addressing sensitive topics, impact of my research on myself, possible impact on others. Absolutely. In some subjects, experimental sciences, For example, part of ethics has to do much more with safety. If students do field work, for example, lab experiments, risk assessment, of course, this does not apply to all subjects. We may have, some supervisors of English A or Spanish B thinking, well, safety, not really. Oh, but need to think for a second, what kind of text is my students going to read? And I have to be aware of sensitivities, personal impacts here. Llama, yes, brilliant. Objective research. Oh, yes. And we could spend a long time talking about this idea of objective research. I love it, absolutely. And another dimension the IB tells us is part of ethical research is about thinking about the environment. The impact my research can have on the environment in terms of sustainability. Again, this will vary from subject to subject. In some subjects, those words may not really be relevant, but in other subjects, if students in geography, ESS, do experience that they could have an impact on the environment. And again, my friends, when the new e-guide is published, you will see several pages about that, going into some more depth. And there will also be the teacher support material for the new extended essay guide. But as I told you in introduction, I wanted to give you some ideas, some hints into what the new e-guide will cover. And so my next visual is still about this same topic, about the new e-guide. Maybe I should start by reassuring you all. Most aspects, are unchanged. It is still 4,000 words, still 500 words reflections, same benchmark, same expectations, same support process, which is pure university model, as I told you earlier, with the allocated supervisor, the reflection session. This is very university. The length, 4,000 words, very university as well. Benchmark expectations, academic research, again, very university. Remember my image of the bridge? Extended essay is the bridge between secondary education and tertiary education. So we'll have this new e-guide. Most aspects are unchanged, but there are some which have slightly changed, starting with the new section in the guide about the ethical researcher. And I hope you all understand why we are here at the end of my presentation today, because we talked about online sources and resources, direct link to academic integrity, but academic integrity does not exist in a vacuum. Academic integrity is part of research. Extended essay students are expected to be ethical, and that includes academic research. That's why I was very keen to mention this at the end of our session. This slide, is my own work as well. It's not a document from the IB, and I created it because, as some of you may know, I did lots of workshops to train extended essay supervisor, extended essay coordinators, diploma coordinators, and I want to start, giving some messages which on the one hand are very reassuring. It's a new guide, but most aspects are unchanged. Great news. But we need to be aware that some aspects are slightly changing, and I've got them in red all around my my circle here in the middle. So we are reaching the end of our session today, so I will just briefly outline them, to use an AU1 command terms, not describing them, just drawing your attention to them. In 2 months we will have the new e-guide, but this slide here will help you already maybe slightly focus on what has changed, and more importantly, maybe what has not changed. As you will see, the new guide is written in a more student-friendly way, with the word you, addressing the student directly. The current document we have, the very long extended essay guide, is not written for students. It is written for educators. Of course, we give some sections to our students, but we then have to frame it, to interpret it. You will see the new guide is much more student-friendly passages we can directly give to our students. What else is changed? Oh, subject-specific guidance. They've been streamlined. They're a lot more reader-friendly in many ways, both for students and for supervisors. So some changes, for example, for what I still call Group 3, individual and societies, we do not have separate guidance for extended essay in digital society, in economics, in business, in global politics, in social and cultural anthropology, in philosophy, in psychology, etc., etc. You know, it is organized per group. So we have the group specific guidance in particular. For maths, it's not a problem at all. But for other subject groups, you know, we will need to get used to this new format. As you know, we had some time constraints in some subjects. You know, we were told, oh, history has to be more than 10 years. Otherwise, it's current affairs and not history. Economics had the 5-year rule. It had to be within the last 5 years. For world studies, extended essay, and global politics, it was within the lifetime of the students, so within the last 17, 18 years. And it was quite confusing to have different time constraints for different subjects. This is gone. Something else gone in the new e-guide is the categories. You know, as you know, for language A, language B, it was always so confusing. Oh, is it language B category 2A, category 2B? I don't know, what should I tell my students to do? The categories were meant to be very helpful, but sometimes they were creating confusion. So with a new e-guide for first assessment 2027, we will not have those categories anymore. Again, you know, this is 2027. I'm telling you about the future here. For 2025, 2026, we still have the current the current guide. With the current guide, we have World Studies Extended Essay. This is going to be absorbed by interdisciplinary extended essay, strongly encouraged by the IB. So in the new guide from 2027, 2028 onwards, we will not have world studies with that label anymore, which I think is a really good thing, because it was a misnomer in a way. You know, some students thought that, oh, I've got to study the world because it's called world studies. Yeah, no, the name was a bit confusing. So we still have it, but with a different name. The RPPF has changed name. It's not RPPF. It is only RPF. We've dropped to one P. More importantly, the new RPPF will be written at the end of the process. You know, currently it is 3 little blocks, total 500 words, little bit fragmented. The new RPF will be 500 words, but reflection at the end, and the criteria revised slightly. You know, we still have A, B, C, D, E, some slight modifications. The total will be 30, and slight changes as well to the grade descriptors. Again, you know, my friends, keywords here is a word slightly. So as I told you, I wanted to give you like little snapshot into the future at the end of our session, because our session is about digital power. It was about online resources, but within a particular assignment of the diploma of the IB, part of the core, the extended essay. That's why for such a session as today, I had decided to add this at the end. And yes, my friend, this is almost the end of our session. Sorry, I'm checking my notes again. I've got all these papers with notes. So just as I started with a metaphor, I want to end with a metaphor. And that metaphor is not an image I found online. I credit it myself with artificial intelligence, using Copilot, and I wanted an image about digital resources. And I tried here to express my view that, that it's infinite. We have the symbol here for infinity, because with digital resources, students don't have physical constraints anymore. Being in a school, there's a small library, maybe there is no library. We don't have financial resources to buy a lot of resources for our library. Well, using online sources, we have this idea of infinity, but at the same time, we have this idea of a vortex as well. And a vortex is very exciting, but it can be dangerous. And our student, our person here could be lost in the world of digital resources. So, my friends, I have finished my session. I had told Hillary I would finish at 50 past the hour. It is 49, so I still have 1 minute, Hillary. So, Hillary, I will just remind our participants about the intended learning outcomes of our session today. I wanted to give you all new ideas about the range of digital sources and resources. Spontaneously, we think of JSTOR databases. Yes, absolutely. But there are some others. I wanted to sharpen your understanding of IB academic integrity policy, and I stressed two aspects about citing and referencing, and also about this Appendix 6 in the latest version of the IB policy. And I wanted to give you some new knowledge, some new ideas about the guide. The guide will be published in 2 months' time, but hopefully I drew your attention to what is already important in the guide, and